Again, welcome to our episode of Healthcare Leadership Excellence Podcast. Today we have a guest that we could probably spend a lot of time with. David Norris, co-founder of Affineon Health, doing some amazing work in the AI space that really impacts the frontline people like most of you are as listeners. So David, welcome to our program today.
It's great to be here.
David and I were just talking. Those that know me well know that books are my babies. And we were just talking about the importance of ongoing learning and just personal development. David, can you just spend a couple of minutes bringing us up to speed on your path that's led you to CEO, co-founder of Affineon?
Sure thing. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I grew up in a technical household, started programming when I was 12, went to UT to get a computer science degree, and did my first startup when I was in school. So I have a long history of building businesses and applying technology to make a difference in different industries. I've been in healthcare for the last 20 years, and I really love building great teams to attack challenging problems. So with Affineon, we are applying some of the latest technology in AI to help doctors and providers in an area that tends to be a huge pain point for them, and that is their inbox. Most of us get a lot of email, and we often, struggle with sort of keeping up with that. Providers' problem is 10 times worse, and they get things into their inbox that we don't get, like lab results, where it's clinically difficult to actually process them. So Affineon is using the latest in technology to help providers save time and do a better job. And it's really exciting because we're making a difference.
So, as you well know, there's many within medicine that are rather skeptical of anything that claims to be able to really change a system. And that's a topic for another day. But David, when you and I had our pre-call, some of the numbers you were tossing around of efficiencies that your AI materials can bring, let's just jump right in there. What blew me, and I'll let you talk about it, but the reduction of cost, the reduction of volume. We have doctors right now listening to us that are looking forward tonight after a clinic day, probably 3 to 4 hours of clinical notes. They don't have a system that allows for scribes. So I told you the story about my cardiologist client that, had 30 clients and worked from 8 to 5. And this was in the first days of my medical coaching, and then letting me know that he then faced about 10 minutes per note times 30, 300 minutes divided by 60. That's, duh, Carl, that's 5 hours. And just talk to us about, and this is not a program to promote Affineon. David came on here to talk about leadership, AI and medicine, but you've just got to hear this stuff, listeners. It amazed me. So talk away, David. Tell us about how what you've done can really affect this situation.
Well, it's interesting, back, 15 years ago when they started putting electronic health record systems in place, like in Cerner and those types, that was a very good thing because it helped to create some availability of medical records and the ability to change them in between health systems. But one of the side effects of that was that it put a lot of burden on the providers to do a lot of administrative work to put things in the electronic health record systems. And if you fast forward to today, most of us as patients access our patient portal and we can send messages to our doctors asking them questions. And that's a new burden that they didn't have before. And now when a provider goes in, and let's say you see your PCP for your annual wellness visit and they order 5 to 10 labs, the next day those lab results come into their inbox. And on top of that, we're sending them questions as patients and they're getting prescription renewal requests. So they're getting hundreds of things in their inbox. And today providers are spending more than half their time doing those administrative tasks rather than actually spending time with patients. So the inbox, if you go out and ask a bunch of doctors, hey, what do you think of the inbox? And I did this. The answers that come back are very impassioned, very angry. I hate it. It's the bane of my existence. It's the treadmill. It's the gerbil, the hamster wheel, all of these analogies, because it never stops. You do everything you can do, and most providers will say they squeeze a little inbox time in before the patients, between the patients, and then after dinner, and then they have to do it again the next day. And if you get behind, you're in the death zone. So providers hate it. And it's this never-ending treadmill that drives physician burnout. It gets old after a while. So the problem is very clear, and the EHR kind of revolution really introduced this problem and has now made it worse and worse. And it gets worse every year because as patients, we all send notes to our doctors. What do you think about this? Or I'm having this pain. What do you think I should do? And often they don't even get paid for those, because it's not like a visit where they get paid. So it's a huge problem.
So, talk to us about some of the numbers you shared last time of cost and actual reduction, and weave in there somewhere, because we've had a couple of episodes talking about AI, and it's still a real concern with how much we can trust HI databases or
Yeah.
AI databases. Talk to us a bit about the reduction in volume, what this costs, and as a CEO who I just shake my head at those that started programming at 12, because I'm one that is just grateful, David, when my computer boots up. That's all I need to make me happy, but don't. And whenever anyone says, oh, Carl, it's just logical. No, it's not. So for someone who started programming decades ago, ease our minds a bit about AI, what we can trust, how you've used it to radically, by your data, radically reduce this poor cardiologist load from 5 hours down to whatever X might be.
Yeah, well, most providers today are spending 1 to 2 hours in the inbox, and we are saving 5 hours a week. So 5 hours is a really meaningful amount of time to give them back. We also, surprisingly, what we've heard from providers is that the cognitive load, the actual mental effort to do the inbox, is easier when you use AI to help. So we're really helping on two fronts. One is we're saving them time, but we're also making it easier to get through. Along with that, we're also able to surface things that they need to know that practically they can't do. As an example, we can read an entire patient chart, 10 years of history in 3 seconds. A provider would take 30 minutes to do that. And because that, they don't really do it. So we're able to go through and look at that history and surface things that they might not have time to go back and review. And with that, I view AI as our job is to help enable providers. So take the information and lay it out on the table that they need to be able to make a good decision. And AI can do that. So we've taken a different approach. The electronic health record systems, when they were developed, they didn't really involve doctors. They were more of a billing solution. And so doctors ended up getting the short end of the stick. They get an EHR system that wasn't really designed to have an efficient workflow for the providers because it was more about billing. We've taken the opposite approach. We engaged providers day one, and we looked at the workflow that they do every day, and we crafted a solution with AI that helps them in the workflow they're used to. So they don't have to install anything separately. They don't have to log into some separate system or change their workflow at all. And that's really, I think, the way providers want it to be. They want to have a system that works. And quite frankly, they don't care if it's AI. I don't know if you've ever looked inside of an MRI machine. It's got a lot of AI inside of it. They don't care. All they care about is, does it spit out a good image? That's kind of how our customers typically respond is, yeah, I don't really care if it's AI. Does it work? And does it work reliably? That's all they care about.
So most of the listeners, I'll just own it. My familiarity with AI, other than the fact that I can search on Google and it says the AI response, and so they're being transparent. And I'm very familiar with ChatGPT, but I think a lot of people, myself included, end there. Explain why we shouldn't be concerned about data integrity, about AI missing as it scans 10 years of medical records in 3 seconds. How can we be sure it didn't miss this little lesion that might have led to a tumor 6 years ago in Carl's background? Talk to us about how you can be so confident.
Well, part of the reason that I'm confident and that we're building solutions that are trusted by providers is that we have done this before. So I built 2 AI companies before, and AI has been around for almost 30 years. And so the evolution of those underlying technologies are now becoming more familiar to the consumer, but we've been using them for years. And there's nothing about what we're doing that is magic. I'm a pretty practical guy. You shouldn't trust AI. It is very, very common. You go into ChatGPT and you ask it a question, you may or may not get a good answer. 80% of the time it might be pretty good, and 20% of the time it is completely wrong. And in medicine, that doesn't work, right? You can't ask AI to analyze a lab result and say, hey, it's okay if you're wrong 20% of the time. That doesn't work. So part of what we're doing, and we got a lot of smart people, and we've designed systems that are 99.7% accurate. And we have gone through the hard work of inserting a human layer so that when the system detects that it is not at 100% accuracy, it can escalate it to a human that can then check it and in some cases correct it and teach it what it did wrong. And that enables us to make the systems better and better and make them reliable. So that's what we've done is we do the hard work, and it's incredibly hard. AI is very powerful, but it is also in many cases like LLMs, it's probabilistic. So you don't get a guaranteed answer. So what you have to do is design systems where you don't use those probabilistic kind of nature in areas where you need a deterministic answer. It is either right or it is wrong. So we've designed our systems that way. So when you get an answer, you can rely on it. That's the only way you can build systems. A lot of people right now are building AI systems where the output might be right, might be wrong, but they are in a use where it doesn't matter if it's wrong. It's not controlling your stoplights for traffic control. It's doing something like drafting a report, and yeah, you need to edit it and fix it. And for those applications, if it's wrong 20% of the time, fine. You have to go edit it. That's not the case in a lot of examples in healthcare. So you really have to pay attention to it.
So talk to us about the big players, because the 800-pound gorillas are Cerner and Epic. And I can hear a lot of our listeners saying, "Well, gee, this is great, but I'm locked into my Epic platform, and great that Affinion's out there, but how does it merge?"
Yeah, we work with all the major electronic health record systems, and I think this is a trend that's occurring. If you look at what Affineon does with the Nbox, or you look at the ambient players that are doing the ambient scribes, what's happening is the electronic health record systems are these huge companies that have so much work to do in just maintaining their existing base of technology that they're unable to adapt to some of these newest features. So what most companies are doing is they're adopting new technologies from like many of the AI scribe companies, and same thing for the inbox. If you want to be able to take advantage of some of these new advances, that's the only way you can do it. You can't really wait for the next 20 years for your large EHR company to do it. I mean, will they do it eventually? Maybe, maybe not. But will they be able to be best of breed? Probably not. And so I think the time for those companies to be able to adapt to these new technologies and introduce new capabilities, it really is just not happening. Most of the leading EHR vendors have created marketplaces where other vendors can add value, kind of like an iPhone with apps. If Apple tried to invent every app out there, they couldn't. It would be impractical. And that's what most of the EHR vendors are doing now is they're saying we're going to be the platform and let all these other innovative companies really add value.
Oh, nice. That just must be a playground for a place like yourself.
Exactly. It's just like the iPhone with App Store. I mean, there's millions of apps for the iPhone. Apple could never have done that. And quite frankly, they didn't want to. They wanted to be the core phone and then let all these other innovative companies go build really cool apps. That's what's happening with the EHRs.
So I have one of my favorite apps. It costs me 34.50 a year, and it tracks flights all over the world because I travel a lot. And it's fun to point it up at the sky and see that little trail is, a Delta flying from Atlanta to Seattle. So I'm a flight geek. But that's 34.50 a year. Not a problem. Are Should people just contact you to find out what the cost is, or can you give a ballpark on the
Oh,
air?
oh, I can do better than that. I'll show you the example. So for providers, what would be great and what every provider would love is if they could hire an assistant, full-time assistant to do nothing but triage their inbox every day. And if you did that with a human, you would say, well, we want you to do this, but don't do that. That would be the ultimate. But no provider can afford that. No health system can provide that, because it's too expensive. So Affineon provides that for $2.50 a day. So half a cup of coffee. You can have an AI agent that will triage your inbox 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for $2.50 a day. And
Per
that
provider.
per provider. And that is the price point that AI enables this to get to, which is it's now something that every provider can actually have. If you say go off and hire an assistant, that's just too expensive for providers to be able to afford, and that's why they don't have it today. And guess what? There's a huge shortage of providers and there's a shortage of nurses. Right now, the projection is there'll be a shortage of 100,000 doctors by 2030. Well, this is part of the way we can solve the problem is give the provider some time back using AI so they can spend their time where they want to, which is with patients, which helps address that shortage that we have. 5 hours a week for providers, that's what we can save. Most providers see 3 patients an hour. So you just do the math. You're talking about a lot of new patient visits that enables. And that is one way that AI can help address this shortage of resource. So many people talk about AI is going to take jobs and that. It's not going to, no different than any other innovation that has occurred in the past. It's going to enable humans to spend time where they need to, like nurses spending time with patients, doctors spending time with patients, and not doing those mundane jobs like triaging your inbox.
So I'm sure there's listeners right now that know exactly what triaging an inbox means, but since I'm not a medical professional, so I'm my cardiologist. I've seen 30 people. I've ordered labs, as you described earlier. Labs are coming in, questions are coming in. What will this marvelous little program sitting inside my EMR, what will it do so by the next morning I'm looking and thinking, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Explain what triage.
So what it does, our AI agent will handle about half of the volume that comes into your inbox every day. And just like if you hired a human, what you would do is say to your assistant, what I want you to do is look at all the lab results that are coming in and find the ones that are normal, where there's nothing clinically to be worried about. And then draft a note to the patient, letting them know, hey, we got your labs back. They're all normal. And you would of course give rules to that assistant. You would say, but wait a minute, don't do all the normals. If there's a normal, but maybe one of the analyte values changed a lot in a short period of time, and it's still normal, but something happened, leave that in my inbox because I want to see that. In that case, that's what the AI does is it takes the rules, we call it protocols, that the provider says, do this, but don't do that. And we implement those rules and we can automatically notify a patient that their labs are back and everything's good. Even if they're abnormal, but it's not clinically significant, we can let them know, hey, your HDL is a little high, but that's not a bad thing. No problem. And by doing that, we can take the work that the provider does not want to spend their time on. These are things that they just want to use their deep clinical expertise on the harder cases, and we can handle that for them. Another thing that happens a lot with PCPs, they get copied on everything. Anytime you go to an urgent care and they do blood work, they of course feel obligated to copy the PCP on it. So the PCP gets a lot of stuff coming in that they didn't really need to see. And we in our AI agent can automatically route that to staff so the provider doesn't spend time on it. So we're eliminating a lot of the noise, is the way the providers will call it. And the word triaging is something that providers are very used to. You come from the MASH program where they had triaging patients coming in. Triaging your inbox is nothing more than just trying to clean it up for the things the provider doesn't need to spend time on so they can focus on the things that they do. And amazingly, imagine this. If you give a provider, 50 lines of things to look at, and one of them in the middle was really important, guess what? They're more likely to miss it because there's so much stuff stacked up there. And if you clean out the noise and you make it clearer, they're more likely to see that thing that was really important. So by eliminating the noise, you make it mentally easier for them to see those things that are really important, allowing them to do really important clinical work. And I can't tell you the number of times I hear that by removing the stuff they didn't want to spend time on, they're able to catch something that was really important that they might have missed earlier. And that's absolutely the most important thing that we do is helping providers to do a great job in delivering care.
What else would you like our listening audience to know about Affineon that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think we're dedicated as a mission, we're dedicated to helping providers. And that I think overall, there's an opportunity here to apply AI to really assist. So what I would say is a message, a lot of people think, well, is AI ready and will doctors adopt this? The answer is absolutely. We get the question a lot, like, are your customers like early adopters? Are these like fringe doctors? They're not. They're doctors that want help. They're the doctors that get a lot of stuff in their inbox and say, I don't really care how you do it, just do it. And I think that that's the message is AI is mature enough. When done right, it can help, and it can help in a way that really benefits providers. And I think overall, we're moving the notch up in healthcare. We're actually improving the quality of care that providers can deliver. And I think that's what we all want. A lot of people complain about healthcare. I think it's actually getting better, and AI is the first new technology in a long time that's actually going to make us capable of making a dent in healthcare. And I really, really like that. That's what gets me so excited about what we're doing is we're making a difference.
So we're going to come back to this right at the end, but we have a couple of minutes that I want to go to a completely different lane. CEO, this is your third startup? So, math was never my strong. How do you corral? I was just talking to somebody about this the other day in a coaching situation about guiding brilliant people who have a lot of different views. And I can't imagine the people you've had to bring together to develop this platform. As a leader, what do you do to harness and yet release high innovation thinking?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's the one thing that I have learned over the years and have done this many times now is it's all about the team. You can take a great team and build almost any business successfully. So I encourage other leaders to really focus the time and energy on putting together the most talented people that you can, and then spending the time, investing the time and energy in helping that group of people to become a team. And it's no different than you can use your analogy, your football, team or your soccer team. Having a group of people that are really talented is good. Turning them into a team is an entirely different task. And I often will engage outside people to come in and identify the strengths and weaknesses of the team and look for ways that you can meld them together so that, for example, myself, I have a lot of things I'm good at and a whole bunch of things I'm not good at. And if I think about it and do it well, I can craft a team to fill those gaps where I'm not strong. And also for those other people you bring on the team, they may have strengths and they have areas where they're not as strong. So the best teams are ones where you are together worth more than individuals by themselves. And I think that is a huge effort. It's a huge task. But over the years, I've learned that that's where you get a disproportionate amount of effectiveness. Hiring a bunch of people and hoping that they work together to win the game, that's pretty tough. It's better when you practice as a team and you fill the gaps so that together you're much stronger. And I think I've learned that over the years, and that's where I put a lot of my emphasis now.
So the last 5 years have completely upended the work side in the workforce. Close family member, brilliant young man, son-in-law, works full remote, doing things I do not understand, but he tells me what he does. How do you boost team in a remote environment?
We've taken a pretty calculated approach to it. So we take the approach that we want to hire the best people wherever they are, and we do not require in an arbitrary way that they get together with some frequency. Like we don't say everybody be in the office 2 days a week, regardless. We actually take the reverse approach, which is when you need to get together with your team or a different team, do it. And you decide. So we empower all the people in the company to get together and do it as whatever frequency is necessary for them. And we trust our people to make those decisions. As a leadership team, we get together usually every 2 or 3 months and we do a 2-day offsite where we have a more concentrated time together, but it is calculated. And I think we leverage all the tools. So we have Slack and we have obviously Zoom and all the things that we do to stay connected in between those. But when we get together, it is very intentional, it is very planned, and it is very enjoyable. And you come away from that and then you go run as fast as you can run, you get your stuff done, and then you come back together. So that has worked really well for us. It's an efficient way to do it. We save money on having permanent office space, and then we use office space that is much smaller because we only need basically conference rooms. And that has worked really, really well. And overall, the team loves it. They get the flexibility working from home. You lose all those inefficiencies of having to spend car time and driving to work for an hour. And I think overall it's a net improvement in productivity.
So, what happens when, because I love this point of get together as much as you need or not.
Yeah.
What happens when you've got a, a group of incredibly brilliant introverts whose idea of where is getting together? And yet, as the senior team on these retreats every, quarter, that there's really an energy that comes from that. How do you convince somebody who's, nope, I can do everything remote, to try the getting together when they're just kicking and screaming at it?
We've taken a cultural attitude that we want to be able to bond, and there's certain things you can't do remotely. So we require that people get together in person periodically. We leave it up to them on the broad scale, but we actually require that. And even on my leadership team, I'll have people that want to get together all the time in person and others that never want to get together in person. And so you have that mix. And I think we try to balance it so that we are respectful of people's personal lives. And, we don't want people traveling nonstop. But at the same time, nothing replaces getting together in person. And so I think we've struck a pretty good balance between the two. I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it, but it seems to be working really well. And what you do is during those more intense get-togethers, you build tighter bonds than you would if somebody was in the office every day, but they're all in their own offices just doing their own thing. You're not really getting a whole lot out of that anyway. So, there is the water cooler talk, and you do have that issue that you're not being able to go plop down in somebody's chair and just chat with them. We do that through huddles and online activities. And then again, we do in person as much as we can. I think it's a better model. I think the quality of life that we hear from our employees is much better. And that's what we think really benefits us long term.
The elusive word you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, as someone who has started and successfully run 7 companies, talk to us just for a minute or two, because a lot of times when people that I work with hear the word culture, it's this instant, warm, fuzzy, undefinable, everyone wants it, no one knows what it is, and it doesn't do anything for results, so they say. So why are we talking about culture? And yet you mentioned it. Talk to us just a bit about why culture has been important. I'm assuming it is. Just talk to us about culture from your CEO perspective.
I think it's critical. I think, and my advice to leaders is that you explicitly define culture. You don't leave it to chance. A lot of companies will just evolve a culture that just randomly happens. And I think being a little more thoughtful about it is like, what do you want your culture to be? And so in our case, we put a group together and we actually defined with all of our employees, what do we want it to be? What do we value? And what do we want to have other people describe us as? So I always think about it, when you think about what does a brand stand for, and I think culture and brand are related. A brand is often what people will say about you when you're not in the room. Like that's how people describe a brand. And when you think of culture, you want people that are part of your culture, but also people that just experience your culture to be able to describe it in the way that you want them to be. We pay a lot of attention, for example, to people that interview to come to work at the company and don't join. Like we end up not offering them a job, but we want them to have a cultural experience that represents our brand. And I think that's important because they become advocates for your company. You become something that's desirable to get into, but that's because you treat people the way you want to be treated. So part of your definition of culture is, how do you want to be viewed? How do you want people to think of you? And we are very conscious of that. And we do take steps to make that part of what we aspire to be. I don't know if you ever finish. I think in our case, we're on a continuous journey to make our culture what we want it to be and then to reinforce that. But I think you put it out front. You say, here's what we want our culture to be, and here's what we aspire to be, and we're going to go do that.
Perfect. So switching back to your company and what they can do for people, if our listeners today want to pursue Affineon, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's easy. You can go to www.affineon.com or feel free to send me a note. I'm david.norris@affineon.com. And we are out at most of the industry events. We're online doing tons of stuff. So feel free to connect however is appropriate. But we love to hear from people that are excited about making a difference in healthcare. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you.
Excellent. Thank you for taking time on the pre-call and for a great episode today. David, I appreciate you being with us.
It's great to be here. Appreciate the time. Thank you.